explained by Jeff, to then take the next step. The thing I'll end with then too is that is a message you've heard consistently. What does the corridor do? I was actually asked that question at lunch, and you heard both those answers from my perspective. One is the Tennessee Valley Corridor has produced the workforce that can do this work. Okay, in partnership with broad sweeping academic institutions, community colleges, labor organizations, all of that, those people are here doing that work now. Fate favors the prepared. Secondly is, none of us get to do our work if someone doesn't finance our work. And so thank you, Mr. Chairman, for everything you do with regard to that, because it never goes unrecognized that we aren't given the opportunity if someone isn't financing our work. If we don't have the capital to do work, we can't do it. And so, from my perspective, that's what is happening now in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, in the Tennessee Valley Corridor. You know, in complete respect for Senator Alexander, the Oak Ridge Corridor, on what's going on with regard to economic development there in the nuclear renaissance.
Thank you, Ken. Anyone else on the panel want to add to that?
So I'm struck as I'm listening to Ken talk about something that Congressman Fleischmann mentioned, the bipartisan nature of support that we're seeing for nuclear now. I mean, I've been in the industry for 37 years. I hate to do that math, but it hasn't always been that way. And so people are doing the math. And when you have COP28 with a proclamation to triple nuclear output, right? Part of it is you have to build the first one so you can build more, but another part of it is you have to build an ecosystem that can support it, from supply chain, from workforce. And those are the two areas we have been really focusing on the council for that very reason. You know, fate favors the prepared in the Oak Ridge Corridor, in the Tennessee Valley Corridor, but it can grow beyond that because we need more than just nuclear. We need craft, we need manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, we need forgings. Those are the kind of things that not only supply a Gen 3 plus reactor, it supplies the industry. And it's not just our corridor, but it can supply the world if we are able to scale it up appropriately.
Our next question is for Michael. And Michael, I wanted to mention you were recently appointed to counsel with the White House. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it was just announced last week that I was appointed to the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and really for a lot of the reasons that we're talking about right now in terms of our visibility into these different perspectives in the energy transition, from the commercial markets into the communities and workforce development, and how this energy transition is not only going back and looking at how we deal with some of these externalities from previous energy investments, but going forward into the future of the opportunities and jobs that these new technologies are creating, especially in ecosystems that are prepared and that are getting ahead of the curve and investing in those supply chains. So I'm excited to sort of bring what we've learned in Tennessee and in the Southeast in general to that table.
It's quite an honor.
Thank you.
So now to my question. One of the challenges we hear about most often is finding funding for commercializing clean energy technologies like carbon capture and battery storage, wind, solar, and nuclear. How can clean technology firms best leverage the current federal and state loans, grants, and other incentives to scale their operations? And can you provide some examples of successful strategies?
Yeah, so Energy Transition Finance was created out of Emerald Strategy Group, the partnership between Paul Browning, who is the CEO at Mitsubishi Power Americas, and Lawrence Quinn, who founded Emerald Strategy Group and was the CEO of Alstom Power North America before that. And when Paul Browning was at Mitsubishi Power Americas, he developed the ACES Delta project in Utah. which is the largest hydrogen storage project in the world, which is currently under construction right now. And it was developed with a $504 million loan guarantee from the Department of Energy's Loan Programs Office, paired with a $388 million equity syndication. And Emerald Strategy Group's involvement in that was in the due diligence side as part of the private equity syndication. But the project was the first successful Department of Energy loan guarantee in almost a decade. The one before that was Vogel in Georgia in 2014. So from 2014 to 2022, there were 0 closings from the LPO. And since then, there have only been 4. There's over 200 projects in the LPO pipeline that are going after this very large-scale debt finance and encounter a range of challenges. In some cases, their technology just isn't ready for that kind of scale. And so in those cases, there's other things like the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations or ARPA-E. In other cases, there's not the market there. So I think with small modular nuclear, it's a perfect example of a sort of causality dilemma, right? It's sort of a chicken or the egg. The Loan Programs Office has very, very little risk tolerance for loans of this size, for good reason, right? Like nobody wants to see hundreds of millions of dollars lost on a bad bet. And so they require the highest level of security for these projects. And so we look at offtake and sales, right? And so that gets, for small modular nuclear, it gets to that, will somebody step up and buy 6 or 10, you know? Actually, we heard this morning from the Defense Department, right? How do you think these new weapons systems get developed? It's advanced market commitments. If you build something with these specifications, we'll buy this many of them, right? Like that's how we get these incredibly advanced new technologies coming out of defense. We need the same sorts of things in some of these energy spaces, and we're starting to see those, right? So, you know, the kinds of demand that we want to see at the scale that we need to see it are starting to emerge for small modular nuclear. And so we're excited to see those get over the finish line. But other things that we see are things like your feedstock risk, right? So how do you make sure the supply chain is there for the thing you want to develop? The workforce and community engagement, right? So how do you make sure that this project you have in mind is going to be welcomed in the community? And a lot of that has to do with how well did you clean up the last one, you know? And so, you know, all of these things come together to make a really strong loan application that will get through the LPO. But if it's not ready for that, there are other alternatives. Like our group, Emerald Strategy Group, works with some of the largest private equity firms in the world. We also work with some of the largest industrial corporations in the world. And so the most important thing about this is leveraging this private investment. So using those federal dollars, you know, sparingly, but using the most important thing that come along with it, which is the diligence, right? The technical viability diligence that can come out of the national lab systems that the DOE can tap into and say, yes, this is an investable technology, and you can go out and start to get the institutional investment that can then be paired with this federal investment.
Thank you. Dawn, as the nation's largest public power provider, many utilities look to TVA to lead the way with regard to the energy transition to clean, reliable, carbon-free energy. Talk a little bit about the challenges that you are facing as you work to meet clean energy goals among rising energy demand.
Yeah, well, and I did, in my comments, I mentioned the kind of demand that we're seeing. You know, we had from about 2009 to 2019, we like to call it the lost decade because load was just flat across the region. energy efficiency was taking up what load growth would normally have been, and it was pretty stable and flat. And then we went into the pandemic, and it dropped right away. But since we're coming out of the pandemic, that's when the load growth has started. And now you see data centers, you see electric vehicle manufacturing, battery manufacturers, and now artificial intelligence, which takes incredible amounts of power, 10 times more than you'll see in a typical data center. And all that is interested in finding a home. And it's growing very quickly. This is why we're building 3,800 megawatts of every type of generation. As I said in my comments, we really feel like nuclear's got to be part of the answer in the long term. But we also have to be very careful. You know, the nation's watching what we're doing. Our peers are watching us. I can't mention names, but there are others that are willing to be fast followers, right? But they want to be fast followers. They don't want to be the first one out of the gate. That first-of-a-kind cost holds them away. And so we've got a very rigorous and structured process that we're going through. I think there's one of our board members on the stage that helped us build this stage gate process and very deliberative path forward for the Clinch River project, for example. And we're over 54% of the design is complete. We're tracking to have a construction permit application ready to submit and be able to make a decision whether to move forward with that with the advice and consent of the board by the end of this calendar year. That's certainly not the end of the race. There's probably 2 to 3 years of NRC review of this new design to go through, but that's a major step moving forward. And getting to that point and understanding those first-of-a-kind costs, you know, I'm always asked, what is it going to cost? And we've been very careful because if you are where we are right now, at only 50% of the design done, it would be irresponsible to put a number out. But it's a big number. It's got a B handle on the end of it, right? Because there's risk that hasn't been mitigated yet. There's still design risk. There's licensing risk. There's a contingency that you have to put into a project if you're gonna really do a project in a mature and responsible manner. You have to have that in now, right? So that as those risks are mitigated, you can account for them. You can take that contingency out. You don't move forward on construction until you have mitigated the risk of design and licensing, and you really understand what you're doing. And so those are some of the challenges we have. You know, TVA is a unique model, right? We're blessed with many things. You know, I don't have shareholders to talk to, but we have investors and we have stakeholders, and those are the folks we're accountable for. And we have least cost planning, which says we can't foist first-of-a-kind costs onto our customers. It's just not what TVA is about. But we also have incredible legislative support, right? So when you think about the IRA, the IIJA, in the past, TVA would not have been eligible for anything as far as production tax credits, but there's language in the legislation that gives us the ability to get cash payments back. We would not have been playing in this game before to try to offset some of those costs, and I can't thank our legislative support enough. And so even with that first-of-a-kind cost is real, and it's something we're working to mitigate and to try to find ways to offset. Certainly, the Office of Clean Energy Development and the allocation that Congressman Fleischmann talked about, we will be putting in an application, and we are going to compete for some of those funds to help move us further down the line to be ready to deploy.
And I can tell you that the people on the council have tried many times to get Don to please give us the number. Please give us the number. He will not do it. So
as soon as I give a number, if I'm a dollar under it, we've lost, right?
Thank you. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit more about your work on the council, what your primary area of focus has been with the advisory council?
Sure. So Don mentioned it already. The council produced a preliminary report at the end of last calendar year. It was issued in December to the leadership of the state. And it recommended that the state focus on two primary objectives or areas. The first one was to partner with the other states in the Tennessee Valley region to advance new nuclear in partnership with TVA, and specifically to deal with support the Clinch River project. And so that was the first one. The second one was to build the ecosystems both from a workforce and a supply chain perspective to support new nuclear regardless of where it goes. So we believe there's as Ken pointed out, there's a lot of assets that exist in the state of Tennessee already that can be leveraged towards building the workforce of the future and the supply chain that's going to support new nuclear, regardless of what design is pursued and where those reactors get deployed. I think I've heard Jeff say that you're pursuing the TVA SMR project at Clinch River, not because they intend to build one, but if it's successful, they would build multiple reactors, and I'm assuming that those would be stationed not just in Tennessee, but across the region.
I think he said one would be like a hobby.
Hobby,
Right?
yeah, okay. Expensive hobby. So those are the two focus areas, support TVA, the Clinch River project, and build the ecosystems around workforce development and the supply chain. And then let me just double click on the first one. So each of those has a series of, I forget what we called them, let's just say tasks underneath each one of them, topical areas for evaluation maybe. And under the first one, the primary emphasis there is to see what the state can do to help TVA with the first of the kind cost risk, which Don has mentioned and others have mentioned as well. So that's where we are. The governor accepted the report and then turned around and gave it back to the commissioner and said, okay, now develop a series of more detailed recommendations that can be brought back to the state by the end of October. And the council was off. I think there are 9 subtasks right now that are working. Many of the people that were mentioned here are leading those subtasks. We've pulled in people outside the council to help us with those. And so all of those work activities are now underway with the intent of bringing that together and then issuing a final report to the governor by the end of October.
Thank you,
And
Jim.
then the council is going to be sunset. Right?
We're trying to work ourselves out of a job.
Yes.
We have a
Yes.
day job already.
Yeah.
Yes. Ken, I know you've been working a whole lot in the regulatory space. Tell us more about what your work has been with the council.
So we've been, and a number of the working group members that I worked with are in the audience here today. We've been focused in 2 areas, which is how to take the next step in the establishment of the Nuclear Innovation District to address specifically what was in the report, that there would be a place for Tier 2 through Tier 5 companies, supply chain, that would support the OEMs that are siting there today. A number of OEMs, I mentioned them, they've been mentioned earlier, have sited there and they're getting ready to move out in varying stages. I mean, for example, the Kairos project could see a groundbreaking and start a construction, later this year. And one of the things that became very evident as we've studied other large-scale successful innovation districts is that if you don't wrap around the supply chain that the OEMs need, the OEMs ultimately will go somewhere else or not succeed. And so there was a lot of effort on that, on how we put the fourth leg of the table that makes up the innovation district, so that there was a place for those Tier 2 through Tier 5 companies to come. And that's progressing well. That's obviously being done in partnership with Tennessee Economic and Community Development Organization, and I couldn't be more encouraged personally what's going on there. The second thing is to implement a regulatory framework that could be applied to the nuclear industry and ecosystem that had been demonstrated to accelerate removing regulatory roadblocks to environmental cleanup, which again, like I said before, it paces everything we do, and find a way to implement that model, which accelerated some of the regulatory decisions on cleanup by at least 4 times, and how you would apply it to an equally heavily regulated industry like the nuclear industry or the nuclear ecosystem, and then how could we support that facet of the state who will do regulations. I think Type 1 energy was mentioned earlier. What would be the regulatory model for a fusion demonstration, for example? And so we moved out with regard to that, and actually have now effectuated that and put it in the hands of the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, who has both the environmental side. Well, then you all know they have state parks, and then they also have the RAD regulation side. And so those were the areas that we were heavily focused on to really do the things as Jeff mentioned, which was effectuate the things that were in the first report, and essentially get those elements to a self-sustaining aspect, so that we could all go back to our day jobs and our families. So it was kind of like being drafted if you haven't been through that experience.
Don, I'll get to you on this committee in just a second. I want to make sure we get back to Michael. I have another question for him. Michael, what specific energy transition technologies are the most relevant to this Tennessee Valley region, and how is energy transition finance supporting these technologies to enhance regional energy independence and economic development?
Yeah, so I mean, the answer to that question is like Senator Blackburn and Congressman Fleischmann said earlier. It's all the above, right? And so it's SMRs are critical. Yes, fusion, even beyond that, is critical. Hydrogen, right? Both for high temperature heat industrial applications like OxyChem developed in the state already, as well as heavy transportation. So for Class 8 trucking and marine, the visibility to having an electric powered Class 8 truck or tugboat, pushing barges up the Tennessee River, it's not going to happen in our lifetime, at least. So, hydrogen is a key element in terms of decarbonizing those. Like the heavier it is, the further it needs to go, the more hydrogen makes sense, or if you need super high temperature industrial heat. Other things would be the electric vehicles, right? Like we are a powerhouse in the country in terms of electrification of transportation for the passenger vehicles and the medium and light duty. We can build on that as a state. Another area are bio-based materials. So, Department of Energy, especially the Loan Programs Office, is great at social media and press releases. You know who's really good at getting money out the door? USDA. The business and industry loans, the REAP grants, the 9003 program for bio-based materials. There's a lot of great opportunities there. There's another ecosystem that's emerging from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that came out of EPA, which is the sort of green bank and infrastructure bank infrastructure around the country. So, in Tennessee, there's 3 pieces to that. There's the National Clean Investment Fund, which went to 3 organizations. There's the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator that went to like 6 or 7. And then there's Solar for All. So in Tennessee, Solar for All went to TDEC and is getting managed in close partnership with TVA in terms of how that ends up on houses and businesses. And TVA is also administering all of the efficiency incentives that have come out. And so everybody in this room, no matter how involved you are with this like big stuff, should stop by the TVA Energy Right booth and think about, okay, what can you do at your house or your business? But that efficiency side is also getting more complex with these virtual power plants. That is a really great opportunity in our region because of the relationship between TVA and the local power companies, all of that being public power, exploring how we can sort of bridge those divides and deploy. What was the scale of efficiency? There's a 30%?
Yeah, we're looking to shave off 30%. And, that matters on those 8 hours twice a year.
Yep.
When loads are really, really high. Makes a huge difference on our system and our ability to serve customers. And on those high load days, when we called demand response, for example, 1,600 megawatts came off like that.
Yeah.
That is a whole power plant that we didn't have to build to be able to serve that load.
Exactly. And with the technology that's coming out, whether it's batteries, whether it's vehicle to grid, the EVs that are expanding, are not just draws on the grid. They have the potential to actually be a source of energy. You've got more utility scale stationary batteries. You have other generation assets, as well as the efficiency components that, with more and more sophisticated controls, have that ability to look exactly like a power plant to TVA and our neighboring utilities.
Yeah, Michael, you bring up a really great point. We're building a new system operations center just north of Chattanooga, and it's world class. It's going to be a best in class, electromagnetic pulse resistant, hardened facility. But it's also got a new energy management system that will better integrate at the distribution level with our local power company partners. And so we're working with our partners to find ways to innovate together at the local power company level, interfacing with TVA. And some of it's getting the technology at the same level where they all have the kind of SCADA technology and the kind of voltage control technology that can shave load without shedding load. And it's exciting to be able to go down this path and continue to grow in that realm.
Yep.
Thank you. Dawn, last question. We've worked together a lot on the workforce working group. And one thing I wanted you to be able to share with this group is to talk about the Labor Forecast Center. I think that's a game changer for workforce in the Valley.
Yeah, I end up bragging on my folks on this because when I came to TVA 3 years ago, we have so much that we're building, and we have the resources to do it. That's my first question. Do we have the dollars to do it? And the answer was, yeah, we do. This is in the plan. This is great. And then I asked, do we have the people to do it? And I got a puzzled look, and folks said, we think we do. I said, okay, well, let's find out if we really do. And so I got a bunch of smarter people in the room than me on data collection, and we partnered with our union partners, and we pulled together 10 years of work. Everything that we do, whether it's projects, whether it's outages, new builds, and we broke it down by craft, and we put it into a database, and we tracked it, and we laid it out in scheduling software, and we got histograms of how much labor we would need. And, oh, it was shocking. We were 5,000 people short in 2026. And so that's the first cut, though, right? Now we have the information. We can start really partnering with the unions, understanding what they have on the bench. We can take a look at our outages where we have flexibility. The nuclear plants, they run out of fuel. They run breaker to breaker typically. And when they run out of fuel, you do the outage. But we have flexibility on our other generating assets to move those outages around. And so we were able to smooth and optimize to a point where it came down much more than I thought it would have. And so then you get into a conversation with the unions that, okay, now I need apprentice classes. And it's a different conversation because I've got 10 years of work that I know I'm going to do. So this isn't, hey, give me a bunch of folks that are qualified and then I'm not going to have work for them. I've got 10 years of work in the Valley that we can move them from site to site to do. And then we expanded it out to, well, what about a new build for nuclear? What does that look like when it's overlaid? And let's take a look all the growth around the whole valley right now. What kind of resources are those drawing? So when you think about a nuclear renaissance or any of the growth that we're seeing, yeah, you think about nuclear, I need some nuclear engineers. I need engineers. I need project managers. I need carpenters. I need tradesmen. I need pipe fitters. Anybody who builds things, electricians. Gosh, right now, my right arm for another 10 electricians at the end of the outage season. But now we know, and we're able to manage this, and we're working with partners in our footprint because a draw at Y12 or a draw at UCOR or a draw at ORNL draws from the same labor pool that we're looking for sometimes. So having that information helps us coordinate across the corridor, across the region, and I think it's giving us a look that nobody else in the country has. When we shared this with some of our contract partners and union partners, there were folks taking pictures of it, right? It's just a database. It's off-the-shelf software. What makes it work is the partnership and working with stakeholders and our union partners as we go through this.
And then we can keep our labor force. And
Keep
just
them
move
in the valley.
Yes, yes. So I think that's amazing. Thank you for being willing to share it. So with that, I think we are out of time, but I really want to thank each of our panelists today for being here, and thank you for listening.
Thank you again, Tracy, and all our panelists. What a great discussion. What an exciting time to be in nuclear. So let's thank all our speakers again, please. So now, as promised, how about a special announcement? You know, the corridor exhibits a lot of emphasis in, where's Nathan? Radical collaborations. So let's take a few minutes and let's understand what a radical collaboration in the region may be in the area of AI.
I spend most of my life trying to lower expectations, so I don't know about radical. I've also never been accused of being polite, and I definitely don't compliment people in public, but I'm going to make an exception here for the person I'm about to hand the mic back to. Congressman Chuck Fleischmann, he is our chairman, okay? Let's think about why he's so effective, and I'm going to gush on you just a little bit here since you can't stop me. You're down there and I'm up here, all right? But I got three things in mind. One is I used to think I was hardworking until I got to know Chuck a little bit better. We talk often. It's not uncommon for Chuck to call me on a Saturday morning around 11 a.m. Now, me on Saturday morning at 11 a.m., I've just gotten out of bed. I might have one cup of coffee under my belt. I've watched a little bit of the news, and I'm preparing to make breakfast, right? And I'll say to Chuck, so what are you up to? He's like, well, I'm driving back to Chattanooga. I was in Oak Ridge for breakfast, and then I met with this group, and then I met with that group. I cut a rib, and I did a round table. I'm like, damn, Chuck, that's a lot. Is that not even lunchtime yet? I said, so you're going to go take the rest of the day off? Well, I'm going to get to Chattanooga. I got another lunch, a ribbon cutting, a round table, a panel, and then a dinner. Then I'll go home. And I mean, we have this conversation about once a week. So hardest working man in Congress, I'm certain of that. That's one. Two, and he said it earlier when he spoke, he'll cross the aisle if he must. He's all about getting work done, right? I learned from my time in Congress, you can either do messaging and you can say things, or you can roll up your sleeves, do what is necessary, and get accomplishments. He's all about accomplishments. And then the third part, you know, and anyone who knows my background knows I'm all about appropriations, right? A good idea without funding is just an idea. A good idea with funding is a program, and a program can make an impact. The three topics we talked about today were healthcare, national security, and energy. Let's think about what committees Chuck is on. He's the chairman of Energy and Water. He's now on Defense. He's on Health, Labor, Health, and Human Services. He checks all the boxes on the most important committees, on the most important subcommittees, on the most important committee. He works tirelessly to get things done, and he does what is necessary to get a result. So That's why we invited him up a second time to help us with the announcement we're about to make. So Chuck, please come on up.
Thank you, Adam. I don't think I could have said that better myself. Well done. He's a dear friend and tremendous, tremendous career. Navy nuke, worked for Senator Alexander on the Senate Appropriations staff, and has really helped me as we write these bills and work through all these things. So, Adam, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Better put the glasses on. I am pleased now to participate in the announcement of a special partnership between Oak Ridge National Laboratory and Vanderbilt University. Relationships like this between incredible institutions are happening across the Tennessee Valley corridor and strengthen not only the region, but also our entire nation. This partnership will help develop dependable artificial intelligence for national security applications. While the nature of warfare does not change, the recent conflicts in the Caucasus, the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, and above all, the Russia-Ukrainian war have been a wake-up call, changing the character of war. The battlefield is increasingly overrun with mass-produced autonomous weapons and systems. From cheap remote sensors to loitering munitions to first-person view, FPV, drones, we see growing levels of autonomy across all spectrums of warfare. Our armed forces need to accelerate the adoption and integration of these new technologies and doctrines if we're to continue deterring our adversaries, much less defeat them if, God forbid, it becomes necessary. Artificial intelligence and autonomous vehicles have great potential to enable our military to operate in contested environments without having to needlessly put our brave men and women in uniform in harm's way, as long as we can trust the AI. ORNL, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, my lab, and Vanderbilt University have the infrastructure and expertise to develop solutions that will give our national security leaders the confidence that these new AI systems are secure, reliable, and dependable. I am proud to support this great collaboration. Thank you.
Please welcome Adam DeMella, AMM Strategies, Congressman Chuck Fleischmann, Dr. Mo Khaleel, Associate Lab Director of the National Security Sciences Directorate with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Dr. Ryan Luley, Information Warfare Division, U.S. Air Force Research Laboratory, and Dr. Padma Raghavan, Vice Provost for Research and Innovation, Vanderbilt University.
I think that's the voice of AI. We got to make sure it's dependable. So a couple thoughts here, right? We talk about AI all the time. Everyone hears AI this and AI that, and AI solves every problem. I recently went to go buy some new irons for golf, and I'm not a very good golfer, right? So it's a little scary when you go into those PGA superstores and they've got about 50 different types of clubs. So I asked for some help, and this guy who, I mean, to me, everyone now seems like they're 12 if they're not my age, but this 12-year-old came out, and he said, well, what are you looking for? And I said, I'm terrible. As long as I hit the ball and it's closer to the hole afterwards, that's a good shot, but I need some irons. He said, okay. Well, what do you recommend? He walks me over and he says, well, these are the new AI smoke, such and such and such and such. And I stopped listening after the AI and the smoke, and I thought, well, I like to smoke a cigar when I golf, so we're halfway there. And I asked him, what is the AI all about? And he said, well, that's artificial intelligence. Thanks, I know that part. What does it mean? And he said, well, you know, they're designed with AI. And I was like, no, I don't know. So what does that mean? Well, you know. And I said, all right, so these are like $400 more than the ones that don't have the AI. I'm not that good. Why would I spend the $400? And his answer was, well, I probably wouldn't either, right? So with that introduction, what we're going to try to do here today is talk a little bit about AI, and specifically AI in the application that we're we've recently partnered the laboratory and the university on, and we're going to work with the Air Force to try and help make sure that they have the confidence in that the AI is reliable enough and secure enough to do the things that they want to do, right? So with that, I'm going to take the lazy way out, and rather than pitch a bunch of questions, each of the panelists is going to speak for a few minutes, and then we'll hit a few questions, and we'll make sure we get you out of here on time for the reception, because I've always been told, don't stand between people and their next meal or drink. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ryan Luley, who is the technical advisor for the Information Warfare Division at the Air Force Research Lab in Rome, New York.
Thank you. So Adam kind of gave a really good intro, right, to this, in that story about AI as more of a marketing sticker kind of thing, and really I want to start with talking about why AI, right? Why do we want to use AI, in particular with the Air Force and the DoD? Really, it comes down to a lot of the same reasons why you use AI in your daily life too, right? It's automating and augmenting the things that you do and a scale or a decision speed or just some sort of domain knowledge that's just hard to do for ourselves, for our brains, right? And the idea behind leveraging AI is essentially to move those quote unquote mundane tasks and allow us to do more of the high level processing, the reasoning types of things that we're much better at, that the machines really aren't there right now, right? And so we look at that complexity that AI can solve for us as a real driver of why, right? But as we talk about the future conflicts and things like that, those capabilities need to be pushed closer to the fight, right? To the edge, onto platforms where we have a small size, weight, and power, payload capability, where the decision speeds are faster than you can even imagine, right? And our ability to communicate back, to some larger processing center is just either limited or non-existent, right? And so we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to adapt in real time, right? As fast as those decisions are being made, we need to be able to adapt and learn in that environment. But in order to do that, we need some key things out of the AI, right? I think the DoD AI strategy actually captured 4 things. We've talked about three somewhat overlapping things today. But those 4 things are robust, right? Has to be able to overcome adverse conditions, right? That adverse conditions can be the weather. An AI trained on a clear, sunny day isn't going to perform very well if it's raining out, if it's foggy, things like that. It could be adversarial countermeasures too, right? You could be somebody purposely trying to break the system. They need to be resilient. So not only can it overcome, but also can recover from adverse conditions, right? Those are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. Being able to react and respond to adverse conditions is just as important. They need to be reliable, meaning we have to have a pattern, a history of good performance, of trusted performance. And then finally, the last thing is they need to be secure. They need to be, impenetrable in a way, not able to easily be attacked. And so those 4 are kind of the 4 pillars of what we're looking for in AI. And how we do that is really the core of what this partnership is about. But it really is looking at it from the fundamental and doing that from the very beginning, building these systems from the ground up with those 4 characteristics in mind, and doing that end to end in how we develop these systems.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. Now we're going to go to Mo Khaleel. Mo is the Associate Lab Director for National Security Sciences Directorate at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Ryan helped explain what the problem is. Mo and Padma are going to help us understand what our solution is going to be.
All right. First of all, good afternoon. Oak Ridge National Lab and most of the DOE other national labs have a long history in machine learning and autonomous systems. And then, at Oak Ridge, we bring additional capabilities to that legacy. One of these additional capabilities is actually high-performance computing. As a matter of fact, about 2 weeks ago, one of our systems maintained #1 computer in the world called Frontier. Right? So these capabilities are awesome for many applications, but especially for artificial intelligence. So we at Oak Ridge know how to process, train, and analyze massive amount of data. We also know how to keep data secure. These are very important things. So there's a lot of things you can do with that. For example, Adam talked jokingly about AI, but one of the things we've done recently in the area of Mariupol in the Ukraine, we were asked overnight to be able to characterize the damage in different buildings. We're talking about 10% damage, right? So we have the capabilities to use satellite imagery, digitize the stuff in a very timely way, and deliver great products with a great level of accuracy. But in general, you cannot do the stuff on your own, by yourself. You need great partnerships. So we're actually looking here for a great partnership between Oak Ridge National Lab, Vanderbilt, and the Air Force. One of the impressive things about Vanderbilt, actually, they emphasize, kind of the frontiers of science, the frontiers of technology, but more importantly, a top commitment for national security here by the chancellor to Padma and others, in the administration. So that's really, really important. Now, I think Ryan talked about the challenges in terms of trust, security in contested environment. But at Oak Ridge, with these big supercomputers and the capabilities that we have, clearly we can bring, scale. So you can deal with massive things, including like a trillion pixel imagery or billions and billions of parameters in these AI models. So these are some of the important things. So Oak Ridge National Lab, as I said, has a lot of history in terms of machine learning, but data-intensive computing, analytics, testbeds, cybersecurity, and all of that. And what we know about Vanderbilt, world-renowned capabilities in software engineering, software design, assured software, and clearly the Air Force lab at Rome, New York, is really a lab that emphasizes secure communication, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, quantum, for all kind of mission type activities. So we believe actually, when we partner together, bring all of these capabilities, we can actually deploy solutions in a timely fashion. We can accelerate the technology deployment and development cycle. And I think we all need to think differently to deliver on missions, because the challenges, as the senators and the congressmen talked about, that we face are real and big, but we don't have a lot of time. So we need to think differently about partnerships. So we're at Oak Ridge National Lab. We're very excited about the partnership between Oak Ridge, Vanderbilt, and the Air Force.
Thanks, Mo. Your comments make me think of what Doug Adams said earlier today, right? Which is that a change that AI is bringing to the battle space is that things are happening so much more rapidly, which is why, I have a background in DOD and DOD acquisition when, if you could do a procurement in a year, that was considered rapid, right? If you could develop a technology in 5, that was rapid. That doesn't work anymore. Our last panelist is Padma Raghavan. She is the Vice Provost for Research and Innovation here at Vanderbilt University.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Ryan and Mo. I mean, Ryan, you said it all, right? You're looking for these performance features that's going to give us, to use Congressman Green's words, the overmatch in battlefield situations. And Mo, you spoke very much about supercomputing and what that allows you to do with large sets of data, right? If you take those two together and you look at what Vanderbilt brings, we've had a long tradition of software integrated systems. That is, it's not software standing alone, but it's software that's connected two systems, and in this particular case, autonomous vehicles. And what we've also done is we've got the basis for putting in mathematical models for assuring that the system hasn't been broken into, for example. It hasn't been breached, or it has certain performance characteristics. It's going to deliver on the mission goals, but then there are error bars around it. We always know what the system's state is, and we can build that in, and we can be assured about it. And this goes back several decades, right? Before autonomy was a thing, the big thing here with the Air Force is sort of making decisions at the speed of flight, really, really fast. And in 2004, some of our faculty demonstrated that if you can come up with this mathematically sound software systems, what does it do in a dogfight against a fighter jet, an F-15 manned by a pilot? Believe it or not, some of the predicted models in this dogfight, guess who won? The system that was designed to win. And that's largely because of decision-making capabilities that are extremely fast and sound. And all this to say is that if you take the capabilities that we have together, it's something unique. And this is something uniquely Tennessee because, very simple, right? One is all the big data, the big information space that you're navigating, the performance that you need, supercomputing, and then software systems. You bring it all together and you get this dependability. And you get this dependability by training on large data sets that are operational as well as simulated. Because with these supercomputers, you can come up with all kinds of adversarial scenarios that test the AI at its best. And it's not about, you talk to ChatGPT and it tells you how to make chocolate cake. Well, it doesn't work out. So what? Not a big deal. But here we cannot afford to do that. This is really about getting that dependability right. And I think in Tennessee, by coming together, we are doing something unique that no one else can do.
Perfect. So if I summarize what I think I've heard here so far, right? The goal of what we're trying to do, at least one example of it is the Air Force wants to be able to fly drones, autonomous vehicles, right? You take a person out of the vehicle, that gives you a whole bunch of advantages. It can fly in places that you might not otherwise want to fly. You're not putting a pilot at risk. You probably have more maneuverability. You can couple it with multiple drones. There's a whole bunch of things you can do, whether it's a combat mission or an intelligence mission, right? But in order to do that, it has to see the things that its sensors pick up and then make the decision that we want it to make every single time, right? If there's something different in the environment, it still needs to make that same decision. If there's an adversary trying to damage it, spoof it, jam it, et cetera, it still needs to make the right decision. And so one of the ways that we do that is to train the AI model, right? And everyone's heard that before, I think, train the AI model. It took me a little while to get these folks to explain it so I could understand what it is. But I'd ask now that each of you talk a little bit about what that means and what the capabilities are that you bring to it. Ryan, why don't you go first?
Okay, so I'll start with one example. I think you all know at Oak Ridge National Lab, we have some unique capability in 3D printing of parts, so 3D manufacturing. Now, we're capable to print parts that actually will meet all of the requirements. There are no defects, so born qualified parts. And the way we do it, we actually have a lot of sensors, sensory data, in situ, ex situ data. So we created a process, a property, microstructure data that we use AI models to tell us how to, roster, how to make a part that is actually defective-free. And so now we're working with the Air Force on making parts that qualify to fly, right? We have a part we put in a nuclear reactor, right? Otherwise, it will be like an art, okay? You don't know what you're doing. Yeah, I can get the shape, but do I get the properties, right? So that's really one example. Another science example, if you are going to make an alloy, a material, it takes you about 20 years to figure out how to actually to make it to give you the right properties. So at Oak Ridge National Lab, we created an initiative called Intersect, where actually, we're looking at the composition, the thermomechanical processing, and then we characterize, and in short period of time, you can master the whole thing. You're cooking it, It's given you the right properties, and that's the hope of what we're trying to do. And a lot of these kind of processes are automated. We have robots and so on. So that's another area of artificial intelligence. It's like a drug discovery. So you could look at drug the same way and so on. So there's many examples like that, Adam.
So, you know, how many of you have children, right? I mean, okay. How long does it take for a 2-year-old to recognize a cat? Seen a cat once, knows a cat, sees a black cat, sees a white cat, knows a brown cat, all of the. Think about training AI to recognize a cat. You'll have to feed it 100,000 images. Cats jumping up, down, in light, in darkness, whatever else. The big part of AI, you know, the artificial piece there in intelligence is the amount of training that's needed to get to a high level of predictability and recognition. That's just at the heart of the technology. It's not going to go away. So what we need to do is we need to build around that. And what we can do in the space is with, you know, with the data sets that the Air Force has, both real and some that we can simulate on supercomputers, we can train the AI to perform on multiple fronts. You know, train the AI to be able to communicate, that is, find the frequency using AI where you can get a signal through, for example, to your base station. You can train the AI to understand what has changed in situational awareness. What if you're flying in formation? What does that mean to stay in formation? For each and every step of the mission, we'll have to train the AI to deliver exactly on what it is that we're looking for. And that is not easy. And that's going to require a bunch of iterations. We're going to train, we're going to test, we're going to train, we're going to test, and we're going to say this works and this doesn't work, and we're going to go back and revisit it. And that's all about, that's really what's at the heart of dependable AI. And if you don't do that, the dependable goes away. And you're back to ChatGPT giving you a bad recipe for chocolate cake, but that's not going to work here.
Yeah, and just to add to that, right, the data being the most important thing, right? The point that you made about needing 100,000 images of a cat to recognize a cat is really spot on, because that's really what it comes down to, right? Teaching, or building a machine learning or an AI classifier just requires an immense amount of data. And also, it requires the right kind of data, right? So I can train something to recognize cats and dogs and distinguish between the two of those, and it takes some amount of data, like Padma referenced. But then I take and I start showing you in a different environment, right, with different backgrounds, and all of a sudden that whole thing breaks down. Right, and so I think that's what's to kind of draw the analogy here. What that brings us to with this partnership, right, is the data that we need, right? The Air Force relevant, the operationally relevant data is what gets us to that dependable, reliable, and secure AI, right? Is bringing the right data, that operationally relevant data, to the techniques that they've been working on and developing, ensures that those capabilities are actually translatable and transitionable, to the Air Force, needs and capabilities that we're looking for.
So we need a bunch of data, and we need the data compiled in a specific way for the model to be able to evaluate it, and then we can see if the machine did what we wanted it to do, right? The Air Force has some real-world data, and a lot of it. Oak Ridge can help simulate some of that, but we also have some other capabilities at the lab. Mo, why don't you talk about that?
Well, we have for this problem, I think we have a lot of capabilities. One of the capabilities that we have is to deal with sensitive data and sensitive information, which is really important in this case, because to solve some real world problems, you're going to have open data, you're going to have classified data, you're going to have all different modalities of data. How do you combine all of that data to help you in training your models and so on? The models are not going to be small. You're going to have billions of parameters in these models. So you really need that. In terms of, like, for example, if you're going to trust a model, it's going to give you the answer that actually we all believe, right? Okay, so there is ways at Oak Ridge National Lab where we can quantify the uncertainty associated with these models. We understand, how the AI models work and we can, explore the vulnerabilities of these models. So we can actually, insert certain things, to make them function in a certain way. Or we can understand how our adversaries could utilize these models to explore certain vulnerabilities. So there is a lot of work at Oak Ridge in vulnerability science associated with these models, which is really, really important in terms of trying to build dependable, trusted models.
I think what we have at Vanderbilt is a software framework, the Software Integrated Systems Framework, and it's at a pretty high technology readiness level, so we're not starting from scratch. And what this allows you is to plug into the software the kinds of sensors that we're thinking about when it comes to autonomy, the kinds of data modalities that we need, images. I mean, you think about it, satellite, infrared, all kinds of things like that. And then quickly get up to speed to start training and testing what comes out of it. And that's the big part, right? The big loop where we can get a baseline software system up and with the data, start training and then testing. I think that's really what we come together and offer. Right. And once we have that baseline, I think the improvements will come very fast because we can iterate on that really quickly. We can scale it up. And scaling it up is really important because that's where the supercomputing comes in. Because at the same time, we can train on so many data sets at the same time. It's high throughput. We don't have to wait for one training to finish before we do another one. That's really high capacity. And that's something we can do here in Tennessee that I don't think we can do elsewhere. And so all this to say is that I think over the last 2 decades, I think there's been just pioneering work done in the Air Force with unmanned aerial vehicles, supercomputing, and software systems. And now we're going to get together, put our brains together, and see how is it that very quickly we can create the new technologies that give us the offset that we need. And quickly is, I think, really key at that.
Yeah, and I think the part that the Air Force brings to this, right? I already mentioned the data as a huge part of it, but that operational context as well, right? The things that you won't see solved by the leaders in the AI industry. What's different about how the Air Force uses AI is that environment that we operate in is highly dynamic and highly contested. And those problems aren't going to be solved by those industry leaders, right? And so we need to solve them, and like I said earlier, we need to solve them from the beginning, right? They need to be addressed as we're developing these systems all the way through the deployment and monitoring those systems when they're in that environment. And I think the last thing is, offering up, what those solutions look like and making sure that they can actually run on, relevant platforms, right? So experimenting with real things and showing that transition capability is there, and then we can kind of bridge that valley of death that we often see in the Air Force of getting the good technology ideas actually into the hands of our warfighters.
Perfect. We're almost out of time, so I'm going to go 30 seconds closing statements. What do you want the audience to know? Padma, why don't you go first?
Well, I know that we're confident that we can deliver solutions, but we're equally confident that the initial ideas that we have are probably going to be wrong. And that's the best part of this partnership. I think together we can work and go to the end state where, Ryan, you can actually deploy systems where they make a difference.
I think for us at Oak Ridge, it's about impact and delivering on mission. Just one example, okay, we all face hurricanes and tornadoes and all of that. Do we know, how to recover from these, especially when it comes to utility poles? Is the utility pole up, down, or at an angle? We built an AI system at Oak Ridge. It gives you that information. We deployed it at the edge. So a national lab, your national lab in the South here, okay, we want to deliver on mission and contribute to the nation's security.
And I'll just finish going back to those 4 characteristics I talked about earlier and really boil it down to one thing, which is trust, right? If we're going to be deploying autonomous systems, whatever that spectrum of autonomy is, we need to have trust in those systems, right? And so, that's what this is all about, right? If we overtrust them, we're likely going to be blind to vulnerabilities, that can degrade their performance. If we undertrust them, we're not taking advantage of an opportunity that can enhance our overmatch, to the earlier point, right? So this is all about finding that right balance of trust, right? What is the right, the dial to turn to get that right amount of trust, and so that we can deploy these systems and have that superior capability.
Well said. So first, I would say we're very excited about the agreement. Now we're more excited that we get to put our pens down and get to work. So please join me in thanking the panel and a round of applause.
Thank you, Adam, Ryan, Mo, Padma. Very good discussion. We appreciate that. Okay, a couple of things. I know it's time. It says I've got 10 seconds left. Terrific first day. That doesn't count. So 2 things. The summit begins tomorrow morning in this room at 8:15. Continental breakfast in the foyer, 7:30. Second thing, reception will begin here as soon as I call you adjourned. Please make yourself free to network, walk around, look at the exhibits, grab a drink. There's a bar here and one out in the hallway, and there's foodstuffs scattered around. Go.